Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is dedicated to the most intellectually extraordinary complication in all of mechanical watchmaking, a perpetual calendar. To appreciate why the perpetual calendar deserves an episode entirely its own, you must first appreciate the problem it solves. The Gregorian calendar, which governs how the world measures its days, is magnificently irregular. Months of 28, 29, 30, and 31 days arranged in a pattern that repeats across a 4-year cycle anchored by the leap year. A simple date watch requires manual correction at the end of every short month. An annual calendar requires correction once a year at the end of February. A perpetual calendar requires no correction whatsoever, not at the end of February, not in a leap year, not in a century year, tracking every irregularity of the Gregorian calendar through a system of purely mechanical intelligence encoded in gears, cams, and levers that fit within a case you wear on your wrist. The 10 watches on this list represent the full span of what that achievement looks like, from the democratizing power of solar technology to the summit of Swiss and German haute horlogerie. Every single one of them knows what day it is. Let's count them down. Number 10. Citizen EcoDrive. Perpetual calendar. Opening the countdown is the watch that brings perpetual calendar thinking to the widest possible audience, the Citizen EcoDrive Perpetual Calendar. The conventional assumption is that a perpetual calendar must be a mechanical complication housed in a fine watch of considerable expense. Citizen challenges that assumption directly and convincingly. The EcoDrive Perpetual Calendar uses electronic intelligence rather than mechanical cam systems to track the Gregorian calendar's irregularities, programmed to account correctly for every month, every leap year, and every century correction through the year 2100, at which point a single manual date correction will be required before the watch resumes its autonomous tracking for another century. The EcoDrive solar movement powering the calendar function ensures that the system never loses power and therefore never loses calendar synchronization, a practical advantage that even the finest mechanical perpetual calendars cannot claim, since every mechanical perpetual calendar must be reset from scratch if it is allowed to stop. For the buyer who wants the perpetual calendar's defining promise, never manually correcting the date, delivered with the absolute reliability of Citizen's solar technology, the EcoDrive Perpetual Calendar is the most honest and most practical answer on this entire list. The Citizen EcoDrive Perpetual Calendar retails for approximately $400–700 USD. Number 9. Seiko Prospex Perpetual Calendar. The Seiko Prospex Perpetual Calendar is the watch that demonstrates Japan's capacity to engineer a perpetual calendar into a robust tool watch context, an achievement that most Swiss perpetual calendar manufacturers have never attempted and would find technically adventurous. Where the European perpetual calendar tradition has almost exclusively paired the complication with dress watch cases in precious metals or refined steel, Seiko places their Prospex Perpetual, a GPS solar caliber in most configurations, within a case architecture built for outdoor professional use. The GPS synchronization available in select Prospex Perpetual references adds a dimension that no purely mechanical perpetual calendar can offer. The watch not only tracks the calendar correctly, but receives time signals from the GPS satellite constellation to ensure both calendar and time accuracy simultaneously, adjusting automatically for time zone changes wherever on Earth the wearer travels. This is a perpetual calendar for the person whose life takes them across the globe and demands that their watch keep up without requiring intervention. The heritage of the Prospex line, its professional diving and expedition credentials, gives the perpetual complication a context and a wearing personality entirely unlike anything found elsewhere in this countdown. The Seiko Prospex Perpetual Calendar retails for approximately $900–1,500 USD depending on configuration. Number 8. Frédéric Constant Perpetual Calendar. The Frédéric Constant Perpetual Calendar is the watch that opened the manufacturer perpetual calendar to a generation of collectors who believed the complication required a Patek Philippe budget to access, and in doing so, Frédéric Constant performed one of the most genuinely valuable acts of democratization in recent fine watchmaking history. When Frédéric Constant introduced their in-house perpetual calendar caliber, the response from the collecting community was immediate and broadly enthusiastic. Here was a Geneva-based manufacturer producing its own perpetual calendar movement, regulating and assembling it to credible standards, and presenting it in a beautifully proportioned case at a price that placed manufacturer-level perpetual calendar quality within reach of the upper-middle watch market for the first time. The FC775 Perpetual Calendar caliber demonstrates the technical capability Frédéric Constant has built through disciplined investment in movement development, and the dial execution, with its retrograde date display and elegant sub-register layout in some configurations, shows a manufacturer thinking carefully about how perpetual calendar information should be presented, rather than simply producing a complication for its own sake. The Frédéric Constant Perpetual Calendar retails from approximately $4,000–$6,500 USD. Number 7. Montblanc Heritage Spirit Perpetual Calendar. The Montblanc Heritage Spirit Perpetual Calendar is the watch that demonstrates what a manufacturer with genuine horological ambition can achieve when it commits fully to developing complications of the highest order. And in the Perpetual Calendar, Montblanc has produced a timepiece that competes with Swiss houses of considerably longer watchmaking pedigree on genuinely equal technical terms. Montblanc's association with fine writing instruments spans over a century, but the manufacturer's watchmaking operations, built and deepened through the acquisition of specialist movement makers and the sustained investment in Villeret-based production, have produced movement capabilities that the broader market has been consistently surprised to discover. The Heritage Spirit case, with its cushion-form silhouette and vintage-inflected design language, frames the perpetual calendar complications with a warmth and approachability that the more architecturally severe perpetual calendar cases in this countdown do not always offer. The dial layout, managing day, date, month, moon phase, and leap year indication within a composition of genuine elegance, reflects a design intelligence that the complications complexity makes rare and the Heritage Spirit delivers consistently. The Heritage Spirit Perpetual Calendar retails from approximately $8,000–$12,000 USD. Number 6. Zenith Elite Perpetual Calendar. The Zenith Elite Perpetual Calendar carries the perpetual complication within a movement lineage of extraordinary depth. The Elite Caliber family, which Zenith has been developing and refining since the 1990s, represents one of the finest series of thin automatic movements produced by any Swiss manufacturer in the modern era. Zenith's position in the Swiss industry is unique, operating continuously in Le Local since 1865, having famously preserved the tooling and documentation for its El Primero caliber during the quartz crisis rather than destroying it as directed, and having built across 160 years of uninterrupted production, a depth of movement development capability that relatively few houses can honestly match. The Elite Perpetual Calendar brings that lineage to bear on the calendar complication through a movement of exceptional thinness. The slim caliber profile enabling case proportions that perpetual calendar watches from other houses frequently cannot achieve, and presents the day, date, month, and leap year indication on a dial of considerable elegance. The Zenith name guarantees not merely horological heritage, but horological courage, the courage to preserve what matters when the industry demands its destruction. The Zenith Elite Perpetual Calendar retails from approximately $12,000–$18,000 USD. Number 5. IWC Portugieser Perpetual Calendar. The IWC Portugieser Perpetual Calendar is one of the most immediately and most universally recognized perpetual calendar watches in the world, a reference whose combination of case size, dial clarity, and mechanical ambition has defined how a large-format perpetual calendar watch should present itself for more than 2 decades. IWC's Schaffhausen manufacture, operating on the banks of the Rhine since 1868 under American founding and Swiss technical direction, has always distinguished itself through an engineering culture as much as an aesthetic one, and the Portugieser Perpetual Calendar reflects that culture in the mechanical system at its heart. The perpetual calendar mechanism in the Portugieser is integrated with a 7-day power reserve, displayed on the dial alongside the perpetual calendar functions, giving the wearer both the assurance that the complication is correctly tracking and the forewarning necessary to wind the watch before the power reserve is exhausted and calendar synchronization is lost. The 44mm case, the large clean aperture displays for day and month, the bold date indication, and the moon phase at 6 o'clock are composed on the dial with the spacious confidence of a watch that knows it has enough information to present and enough real estate to present it without crowding. The IWC Portugieser Perpetual Calendar retails from approximately $22,000–$30,000 USD. Number 4. Vacheron Constantin Traditionnel Perpetual Calendar. The Vacheron Constantin Traditionnel Perpetual Calendar arrives on this list, carrying more watchmaking history than any other reference in the countdown, because Vacheron Constantin, founded in Geneva in 1755 and in continuous production ever since, is the oldest watch manufacturer in the world still operating without interruption, and the weight of that unbroken tradition is present in every component of the Traditionnel. The Traditionnel collection is Vacheron's most direct expression of that heritage. Classical case proportions, a dial aesthetic that references the great Geneva dress watches of the 18th and 19th centuries, and complications executed with the finishing standards of a manufacturer that has been perfecting these techniques for 270 years. The Perpetual Calendar caliber within the Traditionnel displays day, date, month, leap year, and moon phase through a dial layout of exceptional elegance. Aperture displays and subsidiary dials arranged with the compositional intelligence of a house that has been solving this design problem for longer than most manufacturers have existed. The movement finishing, hand-beveled bridges, Côte de Genève decoration, perlage on the baseplate, achieves a standard that the exhibition caseback presents as quietly and as confidently as a museum presents a masterwork. The Vacheron Constantin Traditionnel Perpetual Calendar retails from approximately $65,000 to $100,000 USD, depending on metal configuration. Number 3. Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar. The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar is the watch that answers a question most perpetual calendar manufacturers never thought to ask. What does the most complex calendar complication look like when it lives inside the most iconic sports watch case in the history of watchmaking? The Royal Oak, designed by Gerald Genta in 1972 and launched in steel at a price that matched gold watches from competing houses, remains the reference point for the luxury sports watch category that it invented. In perpetual calendar form, the Royal Oak achieves a synthesis that should be contradictory, but is instead completely, mysteriously resolved. The 8-sided bezel with its exposed screws, the integrated bracelet, and the grande tapisserie dial are unmistakably, irreducibly Royal Oak, and yet they frame a perpetual calendar complication of complete haute horlogerie seriousness, displaying day, date, month, leap year, and moon phase within that sporting architecture without visual compromise in either direction. The in-house Caliber 5134, one of the thinnest self-winding perpetual calendar movements ever produced, makes the case profile possible, and the movement's decoration, visible through the sapphire caseback, delivers the finishing quality that a perpetual calendar at this price demands, and that the Royal Oak name, in its sports context, makes genuinely surprising. The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar retails from approximately $80,000 to $120,000 USD. Number 2. Patek Philippe Perpetual Calendar, 5320G. The Patek Philippe Perpetual Calendar 5320G is the reference that best represents the perpetual calendar complication as Patek Philippe, its greatest and most historically consistent practitioner, believes it should exist. Within a case of classical Geneva architecture, on a dial of extraordinary craft execution, housing a movement that reflects over 180 years of continuous complications development at the manufacturer that has produced more perpetual calendar watches than any other house in the history of Swiss watchmaking. Reference 5320G in white gold represents the perpetual calendar as Patek Philippe understands the complication most fluently, not the integrated steel sports watch perpetual of the 5740G Royal Oak rival, not the grand complication perpetual stacked with additional complications, but the perpetual calendar as the primary sufficient and entirely complete statement of what a watchmaker can achieve. The retrograde date display, the seconds hand sweeping back at the end of each month rather than advancing through a conventional aperture, distinguishes the 5320G from the more traditional Patek perpetual calendar references and gives it a technical and visual personality that rewards contemplation. The movement, Caliber 324 SQALU24H, is decorated and finished to the standard that generations of Patek Philippe collectors have come to accept as the baseline, a standard that visiting the manufacturer and observing the assembly process confirms is as demanding in execution as it appears on the wrist. The Patek Philippe 5320G retails from approximately $80,000 to $110,000 USD, with secondary market values consistently and significantly exceeding retail. Number 1. A. Lange & Söhne. Lange-Matic Perpetual. The perpetual calendar watch world sits. The A. Lange & Söhne Lange-Matic Perpetual, and the reasons it occupies this position are as clear, as demonstrable, and as resistant to meaningful challenge as the movement finishing that defines everything Lange produces. A. Lang & Söhne, re-established in Glashütte in 1990 after 4 decades of suppression under East German state control, has built in 35 years a reputation for movement finishing and mechanical innovation that the Swiss haute horlogerie establishment, with centuries of head start, has been forced to acknowledge as the new standard against which all finishing must be compared. The Langematic Perpetual combines 2 of Lange's most celebrated technical achievements into a single, cohesive, and entirely resolved package. The first is the Perpetual calendar mechanism itself, a system developed by Lange's engineers with a specific and remarkable characteristic. When the date, day, month, or year displays require correction, after battery replacement in an electronic watch, or after the movement has been allowed to stop in a mechanical one, they can all be corrected simultaneously using the crown in a single operation, rather than requiring the sequential, time-consuming individual correction that every other mechanical perpetual calendar demands. The second is the outsized date display, the grosse datum, which Lang pioneered and has used across its most important references since the manufacturer's relaunch, displaying the date through 2 adjacent apertures showing tens and units separately in numerals of a size that renders the date legible across a room. On the Langematic Perpetual, those 2 innovations coexist with a rotor wound automatic caliber whose 3/4 plate, in German silver untreated, carries hand-engraved decoration on the balance cock, blued screws aligned with individual precision, and movement beveling and polishing achieved by human hand to tolerances that machines cannot replicate. The dial, in any of the available configurations, is a composition of absolute proportion. The outsized date at 12, the day and month apertures symmetrically placed, the moon phase at 6, and the leap year indication integrated with a restraint that makes the complication seem natural rather than imposed.